Hello, everyone. This is another Black Conservative. I am Ryan Bolden. Thank you all for joining me. So this will be my first official book review. Yes, I'm going to take the advice of a friend of mine who suggested that all these books that I have, why don't I do every now and then do a book review. So I'm going to take her up on that. And I hope that she's watching this. I am taking you up on that. And this will be my first official book review. Now, before I get into the book that I'm going to be reviewing, I want to explain to my viewers here that this still is a political platform, political YouTube channel. What these books that I'm going to be reviewing, every one of these books that I'm going to be reviewing, I'm going to be reviewing them from a conservative point of view. So regardless of what I'm reviewing, it will always be taken from a conservative point of view for the most part. Okay. And it's going to be dealing with social economic issues and dealing whether it's entertainment, whatever. It's going to always deal with social economical issues from a conservative point of view. So always be from a conservative point of view. So let me explain that to my viewers here. This is something new. This is something different, and I'm going to try it to see how it goes. But when my friend suggested this to me, I actually liked it. I was like, well, I think that's really cool because I'm a reader. I love to read. As you can see, all these books propped up behind me and so forth. That's just some of the books that I have. So I have plenty of books to review. But I want to start this one off with a book that I just recently purchased called Blue Lies. Blue Lies. And underneath here, it says The War on Justice and the Conspiracy to Weaken America's Cops. Now, how many of us know that that is absolutely true? Now, this book was written by Sergeant Jeff Wolf. Sergeant Jeff Wolf, and he's a retired cop. And let me just read you real quick the back here. It says Sergeant Jeff Wolf spent 20 years in law enforcement community. So this is not a novice. He has firsthand experience, 2 decades of firsthand experience of being a police officer. He has broken his silence to speak out about the radical anti-police agenda that affects cops and the people they serve and debunk the false political narrative behind it. And let me say this too before I go into any deep reviews of this, is that I have not completed reading this book. I have not completed reading it, but the type of reading that I do, oftentimes because I've read so many books, whether they be fiction or nonfiction, I can basically scan through a book from the beginning to the end, scan through it, and I can basically tell you whether it's crappy or whether it's a good book. But I have read about 83 pages of this book, and this book so far is excellent. I highly recommend it. I don't want to give away too much of this book, but I highly recommend it. This is for people who really want to know the truth about the war on cops. There is a war on police officers. Now, somebody that's watching this video may be saying, well, what about all the bad cops? Okay, yes, there are bad cops out here. Come on, man, let's be realistic. Of course, there are bad cops out here. We all know that. Everybody knows that there are bad cops out here. But 99.9% of the cops, white, black, Hispanic, whichever ethnic group they are in, are doing their jobs and serving their community. And what this book does, and I like this, what the writer of this book does is he basically emphasizes what the good cops are doing. He focuses on the service of these cops and the sacrifices that these police officers give of themselves in order to serve their community. That being a police officer is a thankless job. They don't get paid the money that they should get paid. And I agree with him on it because it's an underpaid job. They should get paid way more money, in my opinion, than they're getting. And it's a thankless job. They're damned that they do and damned that they don't. If they do respond, it's too much force. If they don't respond, it's they negligent and they don't care. Okay, but this book, he debunks a lot of the myths that are pushed out there. This is well documented, well researched. I highly recommend it to anyone who really wants to know the truth about the war on police officers. And like I said, it's a very good book. I mean, and let me say something else about it as well. It's very easy to read, highly readable. It doesn't use a lot of complicated big words. And he's very down to earth in his explanations of what cops do. Now, I like this because there's another book that I may review in the future that's taken from that's written by a journalist by the name of Heather McDonald. It's well documented, and it was written in 2017. Now, this book was written in 2021. The book by Heather McDonald was written in 2017. And as I said before, she's a journalist. Highly recommend that book as well. Well documented, well researched, well written, easy to understand. But it's taken from the perspective of a journalist. Although that is still good in of itself, it's taken from the perspective of a journalist. Here is someone who is on the ground level of being a police officer, dealing with people on a day-to-day basis, seeing some of the most horrible things that most civilians would never see. And he had to address these issues, face these issues, and deal with them. He couldn't run. He couldn't retreat. Cops don't have that option. So he really debunks this war. He debunks it. Now, what I will say here so far, as I scan through this book from the beginning to end, I was searching for a chapter where he would have, hopefully I was hoping he would deal with the George Floyd situation, because he does deal with the Michael Brown situation. And let me say this before I go any further into the George Floyd situation. I'm going to just give you just a brief insert of this. He totally debunks the Michael Brown shooting. The hands up, don't shoot. That was a big lie. Now, somebody may argue and say, well, that's just something you read. You just read that in the book. Well, first of all, I didn't just read it in the book. I had been hearing about this and reading up on this before I even read it, before I even purchased this book, before I even knew this book existed. I was reading up on it and hearing about that this Michael Brown situation was a big lie anyway. That I don't want to give away too much of it, but you can read this and buy this book on your own. It's very inexpensive, and I'm going to give the details of that and read it for yourself. Except to say here that was a big lie. George Floyd's I'm going back into that. Michael Brown's hands were not up. Let me just say it this way. Michael Brown tried to assault the cop. In fact, he did assault the cop, punching him several times in the face, tried to take his gun from him, and among other things. That's all I'm going to say right there. You can read it. If you decide to want to sacrifice $20-something, which is well worth it for this book, and read for yourself, you can find out for yourself. But by the time it got to the mainstream news took that information and ran with the idea that a white police officer shot a so-called unarmed black man, and Black Lives Matter needed to say got involved in it. And next thing you know, there's all this rioting and so forth going on, but bunch of nonsense based on lies. Based on lies. This is what happens when the mainstream media grabs hold of things and spins a false narrative to get viewership. And among other things. Because I think it's more than just getting the viewership. I think it's something else. I think that the people that are on top have a nefarious plan that's communist driven, but that's another story, and I digress. The point is that there's a war out on cops, and that Michael Brown narrative was a false narrative. That's all I'm going to say on that. As many other situations involving cop shootings were false, fabricated by the mainstream media to stir up dissension, anger, and hate in the community, particularly black people. And it's hard trying to get black people to see this, man. It's hard trying to get black people to see, okay, man, maybe there's something else going on here. Maybe there's something else going on here. It's hard to really get them to see that because they've been so incited with rage and anger that they're not willing to listen. But once again, I highly recommend this book, Blue Lies, for those who really want to know the truth about the war on cops. Let me end the video on this. We need cops. We need the police. We need the police, okay? Regardless of what people tell you, we need the police. If there are no police, if there are no law enforcement, we would have anarchy in this country. Because that's what it is. It's law enforcement, which means that they enforce the law. Police are supposed to enforce the law. The laws are given, and when we disobey the laws or reject the laws, the police come in to enforce us to obey the laws, or either enforce the penalty on those laws by capturing us and arresting us. Okay, but we need police officers. Yes, there are corrupt police, but there are corrupt media conglomerates. There are corrupt business entrepreneurs. There are corrupt politicians. There are corrupt preachers. There are corrupt priests. There are corrupt. In any institution or organization you name, there is corruption. But I can tell you this, that I would say not at least 90% of these organizations that I just named, apart from the police organizations, because I already told you that most of them are doing good. I would say at least 90% of these organizations, for the most part, are doing the right thing. It's just that the mainstream media, for viewership, capitalizes off of the negative, and they end up oftentimes spending a false narrative. And because most people that watch the mainstream news take the mainstream news as gospel and don't watch any alternative news sources because they've been brainwashed and conditioned to believe that alternative news sources are all a bunch of conspiracy theorists, they end up believing everything that the mainstream media tells them. So if a reporter or journalist says these police officers are just out here arbitrarily shooting black people because they're black, and it's a systemic racism, a systemic racist agenda against black people by white police officers kill and shoot black people, then they're going to believe it. And that is a lie. That's all I'm going to say right there, is that it is a flat out lie, and it needs to change and it needs to be exposed. So I highly recommend Blue Lies by an individual, Sergeant Jeff Wolf, a retired police officer, served 20 years in the police force. So it's on ground level. He shares his experiences, his ups and his downs, and it's well researched and well documented. So I just wanted to say that my first official book review. What do you guys think? Leave your comments in the comment section below. Like, share, and subscribe to the channel. God bless you all and see you again.